I want to thank everyone for coming to the very last series. So it's 12 conversations. I'm going to read our bios and we'll begin. I'll be reading my own, so it'll be kind of funny. But we'll start with Lita Albuquerque. Thank you so much, Lita, for joining us for the end of this series. Beginning in the 1970s, Lita Albuquerque started working in remote locations in deserts as sites to execute large-scale ephemeral sculptures composed of rocks and pigments. These installations incorporated other natural elements, such as the horizon line, alignment to stars, wind, and light that situated her alongside contemporaries in the land, art, and light and space movements, but also established her as a unique visionary. Lita's continued development of these elements concurrently materialized into performance, with Lita gathering several hundred participants to engage in what she calls performative sculpture, such as in Spite of the Earth in 2012 for the Getty Pacific Standard Time Performance and Public Art Festival, and in Elongated Now for the Laguna Arts Museum's 2014 Art and Nature Festival. In the last year, Lita has produced 2020 Acelerando, a video installation commissioned by the Fisher Art Museum in collaborating with composer Double Diamond Sunbody and artist Mark Breslin, as well as being part of Desert Acts, the inaugural biennial in the Coachella Valley, with her installation and performance Hearth, with a small H, with choreographer Jasmine Albuquerque, her daughter, and composer Kristen Tobin. Lita represented the United States at the 6th International Cairo Biennial, where she was awarded the Cairo Biennial Prize. She has also been the recipient of a National Science Foundation grant for Stellar Axis Antarctica, which culminated in the first and largest ephemeral artwork created on that continent. 3 NEA Art and Public Spaces Places Awards, and NEA Individual Fellowship, a fellowship from the Cividella Raneri Foundation, a Santa Monica Artist Fellowship for Writing and Performance Work, and Mocha's Distinguished Women in the Arts Award. Her work is held in the collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Getty Trust, the Whitney Museum of American Art, LACMA, and Mocha, among others. Lita is currently included in the group exhibition Artists of Color at the Underground Museum, and will be showing at Art Center at the end of June in the show Eclipse. That starts June 20...
Starts next Thursday.
Next Thursday, June 29th?
Yes.
Yeah. So please help me in welcoming me down. You really work in multimedia. And you're not just painting, and you're not just doing sculpture, and you're not just doing performance, and you've combined all of these aspects. And I'm really interested in hearing, did you start off that way, knowing you were going to do all of them? Was that they were all your interests, or did it slowly go, kind of melt one into the other, did you slowly add? So, is that
okay? Just start us off with.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to talk a little bit about my background. And part of the reason I was so excited about doing this with Lisa, besides the fact that I adore her and I adore her work, is that we have a real similarity of our backgrounds that then expands into our work. And the interest in our work comes a lot from our background. My background is, I was born in Santa Monica. I hardly ever say that. My father was Portuguese but born in Turkey and lived in Paris most of his life. He was a diamond dealer. My mother was a playwright from North Africa, from Tunisia. And when I was 5 months old, they split up and my mother went back to Tunisia. So I was raised between Tunisia and Paris, mainly Tunisia, and which she was across from Morocco, I was across from Italy, from Sicily, and from France. And it was a French colony at the time, and we lived on the beach, on the Mediterranean, not on the Mediterranean, with the Mediterranean in front of us in this big square house. And at the age of 3, I was put in a convent in Carthage, which is a Catholic convent. But Carthage was, as you know, a historical Roman Empire city. And I'm bringing that in terms of coming to your question. One of the things, there were a few things that happened. When I was at home, I was obsessed with the horizon line. And we lived in this fishing village where huge ships would come in from all over the world to get to the harbor. And I thought my father would appear on the horizon line. So it was always this incredible desire to have what I did, to think that he was going to show up. And that kind of, it really became ephemeral, right? It was this ephemerality that later seeped into my work, this thing I could never have, that I could never hold on to. And in the convent, I used to play in the dirt in the Roman ruins, and and get attached to the rocks because I wasn't around parents. I wasn't really raised by parents. I was raised by priests and nuns in an Arabic country, and I was of Jewish origin. Very, quite a lot of beautiful imagery. And so I really attached myself to the earth. It was a really big thing. So go reel forward quite a bit. My mother was in love with America. She had been here in the 30s and had fallen in love with Hollywood and had said she would come back. On her way back in 1939, right after the war, she met my father, who was on his way to Brazil. Then he ended up following her to Hollywood. That's where when we were born. And then when she got back to Tunisia, it took her years to be able to get a visa to get back here. But she finally did. And so I grew up here from the age of 12. And I thought what I wanted was to be a dancer, number one, when I was 5, and I lived in Paris. Then I wanted to be an actress. Then when I was a young teenager, I wanted to be a poet. And then when I was 19, it was a fight between being an actress and being a painter. So it really, it was all of these things kind of came. And I have a degree in art history. I started out in French literature because I did want to write. And then I found out that all my friends were artists and everything I was reading was art books. So I did think I could be an artist because to me artist was the ultimate freedom and America was the ultimate freedom, and I didn't think I could do that. So I went into art history, plus the fact that I got a D in drawing, So I started doing things on my own. I had a wonderful boyfriend who started the graduate program in photography at UCLA, who really encouraged me with painting, and then we started doing that. Then later on, I married another photographer. Both were photographers and guitarists, flamenco guitarists, and and a little Spanish correlation. And through that, then I'm trying to think what. So then I still was torn between acting and theater and painting, and I was never home. So I thought, and poetry. Yeah, I read a lot. So then it turned out that I ended up, okay, I'm going to do painting. So I started painting, and so I painted pretty much, and I really didn't know what I was doing. I really wasn't trained.
How old were you started painting?
Well, really started, I was 19. But when I started and made a commitment, I was 23.
I was 22 when I started.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I had a very dear friend who was my husband's best friend, Robert Overby, who's now quite a well-known artist, who was a graphic designer at the time, and he had a printing company that went out of business, and he gave me this huge ream of stacks of 35 by 45 inch paper. And so that's all I did. I just started to draw for maybe a couple of years. And then there was this woman who was putting together a show of Venice artists. And at that time, I no longer lived in Venice, but all my friends were saying, "You got to see Lita's work, you got to see Lita's work. And she included me in a show called CA 90291, which is the zip code of Venice. So I started out really mainly with works on paper, and then paintings, and a couple of things happened in the mid-70s for me. Number one, Robert Irwin, I was so taken with what he did with space. For instance, he had a show at Rico Mitsuno's gallery that was totally white, and all he had was black tape at the horizon line, and all of a sudden he made 2 cubes out of that space, right? It was like, whoa, but just this single mark, he can do that. And then I had friends of mine who were going out to the desert and doing things in the desert, and I thought, wow, what if I would put color? I've always been interested in color. Like one item of color in the bedroom, like canvas of the desert.
And we will look at them all. There's them all very close. I better know
So I decided to give up painting for a bit and just do pieces that were about connection. They're all about connecting either to the horizon line or to the moon or the sun, very elemental. My work was from that moment, well, up until that moment, the work was very personal, and I felt I couldn't take it anymore, and I said, I'm just going to go out into the world. And I thought that's what I meant, but I really wanted to be Earth. And that's when I started doing a lot of my ephemeral pieces. So that was that. And then the ephemeral pieces started becoming, to make them, I needed lots of people to make them. And I remember the first time it happened, I asked if there was a dancer in the crowd. And somebody raised their hands, and I said, can you dance me a spiral? So she danced a spiral, these huge sand dunes. And then they all followed her and traced, right? And then we filled that with powdered pigment and made this giant design. So that was the beginning of that kind of, that kind of work. Yeah. And then it went on, and now I do a lot of, I'm very interested in collaboration, and I'm working with composers and singers and dancers. And so it's been, I'm not sure quite, there's a lot more developmentally how that occurred, but my love for all these things, and it's all narrative driven, like I love story, and I write a lot, and
you create stories, you invent your own stories.
Yes.
So it's not just like taking old mythologies and
Right.
replicating them or reinterpreting them. You're actually creating your own mythology.
Exactly. And one of the mythologies I started a text in 2003 that I called Genius Remembered, but Genius was like 3 fonts. G-E-N was one font for our genealogy, I was for God, or whatever you want to call that aspect, and us was for us. So it's the idea of us remembering, and it was really about multidimensionality. And in there's a character, a 25th century female astronaut who who has a mission to come to the planet to seed interstellar consciousness. So that's one of the characters. And then there's a 21st century.
That was USC.
A USC. Yeah, and I can show. In fact, I can show you a trailer for the film. So what I did was, this is really interesting. What happened?
It's on your website.
It's on my website.
Yeah.
But while she's looking for that, I can tell you how that came about. So I had this narrative that I'd never done anything with. I told my studio manager, Mark Bregman, who's really been more of a partner and collaborator, and I said, I've got to do something with this writing. And he said, well, we better do something, right away. So I did a project, actually. We were in the middle of doing an installation at the Laguna Museum. And what this is, it was the first time that I used part of that narrative. So what I did did the sculpture that was, the figure was this 25th century astronaut. She was on a plinth that was resting on a bed of salt. That was maybe 7 tons of salt. And then we did these animations of the rotation of the stars at the North Pole, South Pole, and equator. But over that was a narration of the text. That was the beginning of using that text. And then it evolved into the piece I did at USC that Lisa is referring to. So what this is, was a video installation that started out as just a performance, which was going to be, that initially, I asked a friend of mine who's a composer if he could. I wanted to do a symphonic work about the singing of the 99 brightest stars in the sky. And so I asked him if he could compose something like that. And he said yes. And the reason I was wanting to do that is I had done a project at the North and South Poles where I aligned these blue spheres to the stars above. So it was a continuation of that project. And then it turned into a film. Maybe you can. Yeah. And it was an installation. Yeah. An installation at USC in 3 rooms, and we also did a performance that night, and it was, you know,
So here's the trailer.
And the piece was called 2020 Accelerondo. So the film itself is 26 minutes long.
Inef, Akru, Ramki, Mezar, Hadar, Sadar, Shadar, Spiker, Arnhem, Products, Akru, Denver,
Those are the names of the stars. They sound like another language, but it's actually
That's Victoria. That's Jasmine.
Trong về tờ đồ phong bê kì trong đầu về cùng bèo bê kì trong bà thì sẽ về con bà thế Enough Akru Namki Meza Hadar Adar Shadar Spiker
website, there is a little taste of the performance, a little taste of what the installation looks like, and then there's a 26-minute film. And also I brought a catalog of the show, but it was an incredible experience, and it was the beginning. I mean, even though it was only a year and a half ago, for me, really the beginning of starting to include, really to make it into this all-encompassing performance. No paintings in there, but narration, dance. Really, really exciting to me. And I just did another project at Desert X, which was called Earth, small H, capital Earth. I guess I can show that.
Do you have that on yours?
Yeah, it's on mine.
It's on
on And we are going to screen this film at Converge 45 in Portland. It's a huge art all over the city of Portland that's happening in August. Converge 45. So yeah, look that up.
When in August?
When in August? When?
August 9th through the 12th. 9th through the 12th. So if everybody leaves their email thing, I can also send things. Believe it or not, we're still waiting. We're still waiting for the video on this. Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So what I had, this was a biennial that occurred with 16 artists all over the Coachella Valley. And we all chose different sites, and I chose what's called Sunnylands, which is actually an Annenberg estate. And I'd never done anything like that because I've always done things in remote locations. But when I found out what they did in terms of that it was really a place of where people, heads of states from all over the world would come to discuss issues. So it was a real political place. And so I thought, wow, wouldn't it be interesting to do something that's so much about the cosmos into a very politically charged place, and where not just artists see this, but people from all over the world. They have like over 1,000 people a day that goes visit, which is kind of extraordinary. And so they would walk around and be so surprised by, kind of contemporary art. So what I had there, I continued the myth, my writing, my story, and I have a lot to say about the story. We can talk about that later. The fact that we're in between stories right now, all of us. And so Lisa, myself, a lot of artists are coming up with a new story, which is a story of us in the cosmos, essentially. So, and connected to the cosmos. So we did another body cast this time of my daughter, who is the 25th century female astronaut. And she's actually, it's kind of hard to see here, but she's listening, she has her ear to the ground and listening to the earth. And she is on tons of marble dust. And then we did a performance where I invited Kristen Toadman. I'd worked with her before. She's with the Los Angeles Master Chorale. I wrote a libretto about the urgency of having to listen and the urgency of having to take action. And she wrote an incredible piece that was sung by 15 singers. We designed the costumes, and they were singing through the megaphones. And then Jasmine did the choreography with these two dancers. And that's an idea. And they were addressing her in the singing. They were addressing the figure, and it was very aggressive, very intense. And
Do you have the soundtrack?
I do have the soundtrack, but since I don't have, I can give you a little bit. I'll put it on for you a little bit. So that's what I have for this, but I'll give you some holy talk. I can put on. There was a combination of aggressive and then these angelic. Can you hear that? So a lot of it was got to. It was this very guttural.
So,
Where are we going? The journey. All right, so I'll add a little bit to your story because it's interesting. I went to college for psychology and was always at the art department, which I didn't even notice. I was just always hanging out by the architecture and art department. And I was taking grad courses in psychology, doing research with infants to prove that we can actually add and subtract innately. So we would do all these experiments with these 9-month-old, like different 6-month-old, 9-month-old, year-old, to prove that we actually can just innately add and subtract. So we did it with Muppets, which was really quite fun. It was quite interesting. And during this time I was living with my boyfriend, who was a painter, but had given it up for cinematography. But we had his paintings everywhere. And he had 2 tattoos, one of an Egon Schiele painting and one of a Gustav Klimt. So I slept with Klimt and Schiele. And I came home one day from doing these experiments with the infants, and later it was in Time magazine and so on. It was quite a cool project. And I saw all of his paints out, and his boards and brushes. And I was like, he swore that was it. He was building rigs, and he was really into cinematography completely. That was his whole direction. And there they are, all of his old materials. And so I was going to clean it up, and I saw a note, and it said start.
oh, wow.
And that's how I started making art. That's done it in a serious way, and I've never stopped. I've never stopped since that day I sat on the couch, and I actually started. So that's how I began. That's like 22, 23. Then I moved to Paris, and I painted there, and lived with our second father, as we call him, as our father's best friend, Jean-Louis. And then continued, on this crazy journey that eventually led me to meeting my now ex-husband, who's my best friend now, who completely pushed me into that direction. Because when he came over the first time, there were brushes out, because I usually hid everything. I was painting every day, but just hid. Everything was in the closet as soon as anyone came over. And I forgot to put the brushes away. He was like, you paint? And I'm like, not really, but kind of, but not, like completely wanting to hide it. And he wanted to see it, so I showed him. And he said, you're an artist. And I was like, no. Picasso's an artist, like that's, I just do it every day, but I'm not that, And he gently pushed me, and we ended up moving to Barcelona and then Amsterdam, and at the Amsterdam Institute for Painting, I was modeling to earn money, and so the director, Gert Meinrich, said, why don't you take classes, because you're a good artist, and in exchange, you're available to us 24 hours, 7 days a week for modeling in exchange for taking the master classes. And that's how I went to art school. And he gave me the attic, and I cleaned it up, and it was my studio. And he gave me paints and boards, because we had no money. And that's how I became a serious artist. And that's how I went to school. So that was, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can't happen alone, I think that's the important lesson here, is that I certainly grew up with the idea of the artists and their, what do they call it, up in their, yeah, no, by themselves, being alone, and you have to be, and it's just not the case, and the more people, it's how important it is, how much people push you and support you, and how important that is. And the community, I think what you're doing here, the fact that you're doing this and that you're telling people to do that also, the community is what is so vital and so important. So I think it's great.
So, well, I started off as a painter and stayed there for a long time. And then, but I kept meeting people who would say to me, you're a sculptor. And I said, I paint. I am in love with painting. I do oil paints, like that's my thing. And I kept running into people and they kept looking at me saying, but you sculpt. And I'm like, but I don't. I've never taken sculpting class. I don't know anything about it. And I think it's amazing that. And one day I started using mylar, which is what those pieces in the back behind you are made out of. So the world piece. So that's the black piece, the first black piece with the outlines of all the countries of the world. So a friend of mine was using mylar across the hall from me, and I had this tiny studio, so I could roll it up. So I was like, no more canvas, no more, I need to make more space. But then I started cutting into the mylar and creating these layers. And slowly, through that process, I started making sculptures. And I realized that painting was a love affair that just didn't work. And when I found sculpting, I was like, this is my true love. This is what I'm meant to do. This is how I think. This is like, makes sense to me, having space and dealing with space and the 3D-ness of objects and creating objects that interact with space. And then I realized that I love architecture, and now they can interact with architecture. And they really lend themselves to architecture, and it made sense to my brain, and I didn't know my brain operated that way, which is why the painting didn't work, because it was just 2D, it was limiting, and I kept wanting to go inside the painting. I kept wanting to, create this world. So I'm still on the journey of creating a world that you've gotten to, is creating these worlds and taking space and harnessing energy and putting it into the work so that it can then come out and hit all of us and create, this sort of line of energy that brings us together. And I feel like, and there's messages embedded in there. And with my sculptures, I see them as energy, that's actually what the pieces are. They're just what we can't see. Where they're making the, invisible visible kind of thing. Where those are actually, like, this is a portal. It's called portal. This piece is a portal. It's energy. So I'm just trying to see what does that look like, and what do different energies look like. So that's kind of what's behind and the wire. So has this kind of ephemeral feeling that it's still there, but it kind of disappears and appears, especially with photography. You put a camera in front of my work and it just disappears. It's like, where did it go? But it's in front of you and you can feel it. And it's the challenge, how do I put energy into something that's so industrial and cold? And
you do more than just, put energy into what's industrial and cool. I mean, you've turned it into something poetic. You said industrial, it was like, what?
Right, it's industrial materials.
Right, but you've transformed it into a drawing and poetry and delicacy.
And poetry was my other love. And my ex-husband is a musician who was a painter. He would really love to scare his mother, who really wanted him to get like a post office job. I mean, she was serious too. Because it was safe, he had insurance, it's all okay. And he said, oh, I'm a musician, and don't worry, if that doesn't work, I'll fall back on my painting. But if that doesn't work, I'll fall back on my poetry. And it was just giant for that. When we lived in Amsterdam, we would go and do poetry. We wrote poetry and we would perform it. And we created these backdrops. We painted these backdrops. And John sometimes would play music while I read my poetry. And it was at the Amstel Cafe, International Cafe, so it was all in different languages, but primarily in English. And we even made a catalog from it. But the first time we went was really to earn money. We had no money, and they had a poetry contest. So we thought, well, we can earn this 25 guilders, or whatever it was, which was a lot at the time. And John won second place for a poem. It's a song, but he turned it into a poem called "I'm Addicted to Meaningless Sex." And Xavier Simmons, if anybody knows Xavier Simmons, who wrote The Happy Hooker, was on the jury. So that worked out really well. And so then she used to pay us to read poetry at her parties. And she would have these wonderful, like, 5-course meal parties with all the creatives of Amsterdam. And we were part of that group, but she also paid us to read our poetry.
Yeah.
And so that was part of our journey of making art and poetry and, and community. We've been doing it for a long time.
When you said portal, it made me think of a very different kind of portal that I want to show. Let's see if I can get to it. And just to show everybody how interesting it is that the idea is the same in the different ways of getting to it. So I'm kind of running, I'm just picking little things that get triggered by what he's saying. But to give it a little bit of background, I did a lot of projects out in the desert, and some of them were aligning rocks to the stars above. And then I got this image in my head that just came to me of seeing the Earth from space that had nothing on it but gold-tipped pyramids that were aligned to the stars all around. And I thought, wow, what an incredible image. But of course, I'm not going to do pyramids, but maybe I can do star points on the Earth. Years later, I decided, okay, I'll start with the North and the South Poles, that's all. Simple. A little thing like that. And what was interest to me was, this is the rotation of the stars, but what was of interest to me was exactly what you're talking about, the portal, was that through, if you did the star light coming through the poles, through the axis of the Earth, then you get like a shaft of light coming through the Earth. And it was creating portals, like for instance, in Antarctica, for me, I really thought of this as the raising of Kundalini, that the South Pole is like the root chakra, and that by activating this kind of light that comes from stars, then it would activate something, on the planet. So that was, that kind of an idea. These are different ideas of it. Yeah. So, and then what was interesting is that then I thought I was going to do, these are different sites, and what I did. Which one?
Talk about the
Yeah, so there's a lot. Let's see. This is going to Antarctica, and so what I proposed, this is, I found out at that time no one was going to Antarctica, you never heard of it. No one was going to the North Pole, they still don't do too much. But I found out about the National Science Foundation that gives grants to artists and writers. So we applied for a grant. My assistant, Rochelle Fab, did this work for months and months on putting this grant together. And we got it, and so the proposal was to bring 99 blue orbs that would work with an astronomer, and they would be aligned to the stars above, which is what we did, essentially. So what you're seeing here are different parts and at different times. We were there for 5 weeks, which was an extraordinary gift. So that gives you an idea. And the idea was also to go to the North Pole, but the North Pole is not a continent, it's just water. It's 90 degrees north. But I did receive an artist residency on a Russian nuclear icebreaker that took me to the North Pole. And I had to pay by teaching the tourists who were going on it how to draw polar bears. So I did it! So I ended up I couldn't bring all my things. This is still in Antarctica. I have a beautiful film of this. It's an 8-minute film. And
What are the orbs made out of?
fiberglass.
Oh, okay.
And I have one, the largest one, I have a 4-foot diameter one at the Underground Museum as part of the Artist Hotel show.
And did you brought them all with you?
In halves. In halves, not with me, no. At first, the way I had it was 600 cubic feet, and they said, sorry, can't do this. So then we decided to make them in such a way that we could screw them together there. And so they were nestled, and so it went to 200 cubic feet, and they took a ship. We got them to Oxnard, Oxnard shipped them to New Zealand, and then they airlifted them to Antarctica. It was an amazing and this was the team. I had the scientist come to the base to walk in the kind of spiraling motion of the stars above as a small, as a performance. And this is obviously in the middle of nowhere. And then at the North Pole, 6 months later, I was on the North Pole, and which was mainly breaking ice on this Russian icebreaker. And the only way you know you're at the North Pole is if it's 90 degrees north. And apparently only 10,000 people in the history of the planet have been there, so I felt like, wow, I was part of this. It felt very strange. I was there with very strange people. There were like, 120 was the Russian crew, they were fine. 135 were like the Austrian cooking crew, they were great. The tourists who were there were paying like $40,000 to go on this really bizarre trip. Had no idea why they were there. It was the oddest thing. And they were like from all over the world, all kinds of countries and everything. And
They're like, this is it, that's it.
this is it. And we all thought, we did have a moment where we felt the entire world could just drop out. And, you know, they were like in the middle, way out there. So it was really fantastic to not circumnavigate, well, kind of, you know, going from the South to the North Pole, to feel the Earth in that way, you know, to really get to know it. I think of the Earth a lot as a sculpture that you can hold in your hand. And then when I go into fantasy about the multidimensionality, right, the 25th century astronaut who comes to see interstellar consciousness, then, yeah, you know, she sees the Earth, she sees it from a great distance, she knows what she is to do on this planet, you know, so I go into all these imaginative worlds. So I go from straight, you know, it looks like a minimal sculpture to a whole other kind of story, which is kind of fun. So in this case, what I did, I played with the tourists, and they had yellow coats, and I had them essentially move in the same kind of rotation of the stars above. So that's what you're getting.
So I was curious about the color. It's a very distinct use of like the blue
Yes,
and the red
yes.
performances, and now you're sort of borrowing the jackets.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could unpack a little bit about, you know, where these colors are coming from.
I can show you that once toward the end of our talk. I'll show you the film that I'm going to be showing at Art Center, and that will explain that. You'll have to catch it, and if you can't catch it, then you'll have to ask me again. But it is very specific, the colors. But yeah, so this could be gold.
But that was really a borrowed kind of phenomenon.
So we're the red. I didn't, you know, the red is what they had there, which is really great. Yeah. Yeah.
The ship
So-
is red.
The ship is red, but in Antarctica, the clothes were red, the parkas were red. So it's really, yeah, it's very interesting. I do that a lot of allowing things to, taking in what's there, right? And it's really, it's jumping into the void. You know, you just went, okay, you just trust what's there, and it usually works out, which is kind of amazing. It's pretty well. So yeah, so that's what happened up there at the North Pole. And let's see. And then I had one here, and that's at exactly 90 degrees north. So it's that activation, you know, I'm interested in that. And I was talking with Mark, who, again, like I said, is my kind of collaborator, partner. We were talking about light, because we've been working on this solar eclipse show. And we're talking about how, obviously, that everything comes from light, and how we're birthed out of light, but we're birthed out of ancient starlight, right? And then I was thinking, which is a thought I'd never thought about before, well, the ancient starlight comes, but then it goes through the earth, and then it continues forever, right? So this ancient starlight affects all planetary systems, all galaxies, and it's just this amazing thing of what light does. You know, so anyway.
We come from star dust. I mean,
And
everything
that's
starts
totally-
with stars. Everything is there.
So did you believe those constellations appear in the nature, or you took it?
Did I leave them? The one thing about Antarctica, there is a treaty that everything that you take to Antarctica, you have to bring back, including waste material, all of that. So I was crying. They looked so, there's no way you can show what it was like, the blue against the white, being out in the middle of nowhere, seeing that. And they were so, they like they were meant to be there. And we were a team of 5, and we all had this fantasy of seeing them, get deep and frozen into the continent, and centuries from now, we're not allowed to, so we had to take them out, which was that. I'm okay with ephemeral. That was hard.
Yeah,
Yes.
this view looks like it's suspended.
Yeah, that
Talk
one.
about that.
Well, it's actually, it's not a plexiglass, it's not a fiberglass, it's actually a balloon, because I couldn't bring anything. Yeah. So it's one of those weather balloons. Yeah.
I'm going to show much. Okay,